Marcus Williams sat on his front porch, watching the morning sun reflect off the chrome of his beloved 1995 Harley-Davidson Softail. The bike gleamed like a jewel in his small driveway, every inch polished to perfection. At 67, Marcus had owned that motorcycle for over 20 years, and it was more than just transportation. It was his freedom, his therapy, and his connection to a brotherhood he'd found after returning from Vietnam. The old veteran ran his weathered fingers through his graying beard as his phone buzzed with another text from his daughter Sarah. The message was brief, but devastating. "Dad, Emma's medicine costs went up again. Insurance won't cover the new dosage. We need $3,200 by Friday, or they won't fill the prescription." Marcus closed his eyes and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. His 8-year-old granddaughter, Emma, had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition 2 years ago. The little girl who used to run around his backyard chasing butterflies now needed expensive medication just to get through each day without pain. Sarah worked 2 jobs as a single mother, but even with her efforts and Marcus's modest veterans pension, they were drowning in medical bills. He walked over to his Harley and placed his hand on the leather seat he'd worn smooth over countless miles. This bike had carried him through the darkest days after the war, when nightmares kept him awake and crowds made him nervous. On long rides through the countryside, the rumble of the engine and the wind in his face had slowly helped heal wounds that couldn't be seen. The motorcycle had taken him to veteran gatherings, charity rides, and motorcycle shows where he'd met some of his closest friends. Marcus remembered the day he bought the bike. He'd been working construction, saving every penny for months. When he finally walked into the dealership with cash in hand, he felt like he was buying back a piece of his soul. The salesman, a fellow veteran, had knocked off $200 when Marcus mentioned his service. That Harley represented freedom from the memories that haunted him, a way to escape when the world became too much. But now, looking at his phone again, Marcus saw another message from Sarah with a photo of Emma in her hospital bed during her last treatment. The little girl was smiling despite the IV in her small arm, holding up a drawing she'd made for her grandfather. It showed a stick figure man on a motorcycle with the words, "Grandpa is my hero," written in purple crayon. Marcus had raised Sarah, alone after his wife died in a car accident 15 years ago. He'd worked double shifts, missed social events, and sacrificed everything to make sure his daughter had what she needed for college. Now Sarah was doing the same thing for Emma, but the medical bills were bigger than anything they'd ever faced. The insurance company had changed their policy, claiming Emma's new medication was experimental despite her doctor's insistence that it was the only treatment keeping her stable. Walking back into his small house, Marcus looked at the stack of medical bills on his kitchen table. The numbers blurred together, but he knew they totaled more than his yearly income. Sarah had been too proud to ask him for help until now, handling everything herself while working as a nurse's aide during the day and cleaning offices at night. But Emma's condition was getting worse, and the new medication was her only hope for a normal childhood. The old veteran sat down heavily in his recliner, the same chair where he'd held Emma as a baby while Sarah finished nursing school. He remembered teaching Emma how to tie her shoes in this room, helping her with homework at the kitchen table, and listening to her excited chatter about school. The little girl had brought light back into his life after years of struggling with his own demons. Marcus picked up the title to his Harley from his desk drawer. He'd kept all the paperwork meticulously organized, just like the Army had taught him. The motorcycle was worth about $4,000 in good condition, maybe more to the right buyer who appreciated its vintage appeal and perfect maintenance. It would be enough to cover Emma's medication with some left over for future prescriptions. His neighbor Tom knocked on the door, arriving for their usual morning coffee. Tom was also a veteran, and the 2 men had shared many stories over the years about their service and the challenges of coming home. When Marcus explained the situation, Tom immediately offered to help with money, but Marcus knew his friend was on a fixed income too. "I've already made up my mind," Marcus told Tom, gesturing toward the Harley. "That bike has given me everything I needed. Now it's time for it to give Emma what she needs." Tom understood immediately. Both men had learned in the service that sometimes the hardest decisions were also the clearest ones. Family came first, always. The motorcycle was just metal and chrome, but Emma was Marcus's blood, his legacy, his future. As the day wore on, Marcus began cleaning his Harley one last time as an owner. He polished every surface, checked the oil, and made sure everything was perfect for whoever would buy it. Each wipe of the cloth felt like saying goodbye to an old friend. Neighbors stopped by, curious about why he was giving the bike such attention. When he explained, several offered to help with money, but Marcus politely declined. This was something he needed to do himself. That evening, Sarah called to check on him. When he told her his plan, she started crying over the phone. "Dad, I can't let you sell your bike for us. I know how much it means to you." "Emma means more," Marcus replied simply. "That little girl is going to have a full life, and I'm going to make sure of it. The bike is just a thing, sweetheart. You and Emma are my everything." As the sun set, Marcus sat on his porch one last time with his Harley, planning how he would advertise it for sale the next day. The next morning, Marcus woke up before dawn, as he had every day for the past 40 years. Military habits died hard, and even in retirement, he couldn't shake the routine that had kept him alive in Vietnam. He made his coffee strong and black, the way soldiers learned to drink it when sugar and cream were luxuries they couldn't count on. Today felt different, though. Today he would put his Harley up for sale. He spent an hour crafting the perfect advertisement on his old laptop, a gift from Sarah 3 Christmases ago. The description was honest and detailed. 1995 Harley-Davidson Softail. Excellent condition, one owner, 89,000 miles, garage kept, all maintenance records available. Selling due to family emergency. $3,800 or best offer. He included photos that showed every angle of the bike, highlighting its pristine condition and custom touches he'd added over the years. The first call came within an hour of posting the ad online. A young man named Derek wanted to see the bike that afternoon. His voice was eager, excited, the way Marcus remembered feeling when he first laid eyes on a Harley. Marcus agreed to meet him at 2 o'clock, giving him time to take the bike for one final ride. He geared up slowly, pulling on the leather jacket that had protected him through countless miles and weather conditions. The jacket was worn soft now, molded to his body like a second skin. He'd sewn patches on it over the years, his Army unit insignia, veteran organization logos, and pins from motorcycle rallies across the country. Each one told a story of friendship, adventure, or service. Starting the Harley, Marcus felt the familiar vibration travel through his body. The engine's rumble was like a heartbeat, steady and strong. He backed out of his driveway and headed for the open road, taking the long route through the countryside where he'd spent so many hours thinking and healing. The wind carried away his worries, at least temporarily, as muscle memory guided him through turns he'd taken thousands of times. He stopped at Miller's Diner, a spot where local bikers gathered every weekend. The owner, Janet, had known Marcus for 15 years and always saved him a piece of apple pie when he rode by. She noticed something different in his expression when he walked in. "You look like a man carrying the world on his shoulders," she said, pouring him coffee without being asked. Marcus explained the situation while eating what might be his last piece of Janet's famous pie as a Harley owner. Janet listened quietly, nodding with understanding. She'd raised 3 children as a single mother and knew about impossible choices and sleepless nights spent worrying about money. "That little girl is lucky to have you," Janet said finally. "Not many grandfathers would make that kind of sacrifice." "It's not a sacrifice," Marcus replied, though his voice caught slightly. "It's just what you do for family." Back home, Derek arrived exactly on time, a good sign in Marcus's book. The young man was in his early 30s, clean-cut and respectful. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan and now worked as a paramedic. As he examined the Harley with knowledgeable hands, Marcus saw himself 20 years ago, a veteran looking for something to help him transition back to civilian life. Derek's appreciation for the bike's condition was genuine. He understood the care Marcus had taken with maintenance, the quality of the custom work, and the bike's history. When Derek started the engine, his smile reminded Marcus why he'd fallen in love with riding in the first place. "This is exactly what I've been looking for," Derek said. "I can pay your asking price today, Cash." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because Emma would get her medicine, sadness because his riding days were over. His pension wouldn't stretch to buying another bike, and at 67, he wasn't sure he wanted to start over with something new anyway. They handled the paperwork in Marcus's kitchen, both men understanding the significance of the moment. Derek mentioned that he planned to ride the bike to work and take weekend trips to visit his own grandfather in the mountains. Knowing the Harley would be loved and used properly made letting go a little easier. After Derek rode away, Marcus stood in his driveway looking at the empty space where his bike had been parked. 22 years of memories lived in that spot. He'd worked on the Harley there during countless weekends, teaching Sarah's ex-husband basic maintenance before their marriage fell apart. He'd washed it there every Sunday, often with Emma helping when she was younger, her small hands struggling to hold the heavy hose. Tom appeared at his fence, having watched the transaction from his window. "How you doing, brother?" "I'm okay," Marcus said and meant it. "Derek seems like a good kid, he'll take care of her." That evening, Sarah and Emma came over for dinner, a weekly tradition they'd maintained even during the hardest times. Emma hugged her grandfather extra tight, somehow sensing that something important had happened. Sarah had brought groceries and cooked Marcus's favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables just like his mother used to make. "Grandpa, where's your motorcycle?" Emma asked during dinner, having noticed the empty driveway. Marcus knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in his weathered ones. "I sold it to help get your medicine, sweetheart. That bike took good care of me for a long time, and now it's going to help take good care of you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "But you love that bike, Grandpa." "I love you more," Marcus said simply. "And sometimes when we love someone very much, we do whatever it takes to help them feel better." The little girl threw her arms around his neck, holding him tight. In that moment, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. The Harley had served its purpose in his life, helping him heal and find peace after the war. Now its final service was protecting his granddaughter's future. Later, after Sarah and Emma had gone home, Marcus sat on his porch in the gathering darkness. The street seemed quieter without the Harley's presence, but inside the house he could hear Emma's laughter echoing from dinner. That sound was worth more than any motorcycle ever made. Tomorrow he would take the money to the pharmacy and make sure Emma's prescription was filled. The bike was gone, but his family was safe. Rondeau, an old soldier, there was no greater victory than that. 3 days after selling his Harley, Marcus stood in line at Westfield Pharmacy with Derek's cash envelope in his jacket pocket. The money felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. The end of one chapter of his life and the beginning of Emma's chance at a healthy future. The pharmacist, Mrs. Chen, had known the Williams family for years and always showed extra kindness when filling Emma's prescriptions. The new medication should help reduce Emma's inflammation significantly, Mrs. Chen explained as she handed Marcus the small white bag that had cost him everything he treasured. "The doctor says patients usually see improvement within 2 weeks." Marcus nodded, tucking the medication safely into his jacket. As he walked home, he felt a strange mixture of emptiness and purpose. The empty driveway still caught his eye every time he approached his house, but knowing Emma would feel better made the sacrifice worthwhile. That afternoon, Sarah called with excitement in her voice. "Dad, Emma's teacher said she participated more in class today than she has in weeks. Just knowing the medicine is coming seems to have given her hope." The next few days fell into a new rhythm for Marcus. Without weekend rides to plan or a motorcycle to maintain, he found himself with unexpected free time. He started volunteering at the local VA hospital, reading to patients and sharing stories with fellow veterans. The work reminded him that his service to others didn't end with his military discharge. It had simply taken a different form. On Thursday evening, Marcus was watering his small garden when he noticed a motorcycle turning onto his street. The rider was Derek, and he was followed by another Harley, then another. Marcus counted 7 bikes total as they pulled into his driveway and along the curb in front of his house. Derek shut off his engine and approached with a serious expression. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about something important," Derek said, removing his helmet. "I've been riding your Harley for a few days now, and I keep thinking about what you told me, about selling it for your granddaughter's medicine." Marcus felt a flutter of concern. Had something gone wrong with the sale? Did Derek want to return the bike? "Is there a problem with the Harley?" "No, sir. The bike is perfect." Derek gestured toward the other riders, who were now gathering around them. "These are my brothers from the Iron Eagles Motorcycle Club. We ride together, we watch out for each other, and we help veterans in need. When I told them your story, they insisted on meeting you." A large man with graying hair and leather vest covered in patches stepped forward. "I'm Bull, club president. Derek here told us about your sacrifice for your granddaughter. We respect what you did, but we can't let it stand." Marcus was confused. "I don't understand." Another rider, a woman named Phoenix with intricate tattoos covering her arms, spoke up. "We've all heard about veterans who had to sell their bikes for medical bills, house payments, or family emergencies. It breaks our hearts every time. A veteran's Harley isn't just transportation, it's therapy, freedom, and connection to something bigger." Bull nodded in agreement. "We've been planning something special for situations like yours. The Iron Eagles have a fund we contribute to every month, money set aside to help veterans and their families. We want to buy your Harley back from Derek and give it back to you." Marcus felt his knees go weak. "I can't accept charity. I appreciate the offer, but Emma needs that medicine money." "It's not charity," said a younger rider named Axel. "It's brotherhood. We take care of our own, and you're one of us whether you wear our colors or not. You served your country, you served your family, and now it's time to let your brothers serve you." Derek stepped forward holding the Harley's keys. "I never intended to keep your bike permanently, Marcus. From the moment you told me why you were selling it, I knew this day would come. The Iron Eagles contacted me yesterday with their plan." Phoenix handed Marcus an envelope. "This contains $4,200, enough to replace what you spent on Emma's medicine and give you some extra for future prescriptions. The club voted unanimously to approve this expenditure from our emergency fund." Marcus opened the envelope with shaking hands, unable to believe what he was seeing. The money was real in crisp bills, more than he'd received from selling the bike. "I don't know what to say, this is too much." "It's not enough," Bull replied firmly. "Veterans like you carried us all on your backs when you served. Now it's our turn to carry you. The Iron Eagles have been blessed with success in our various businesses and careers. This is how we pay it forward." Another club member, an older man called Ghost, spoke up. "I lost my brother in Desert Storm. He loved his Harley more than anything except his family. When I see veterans forced to sell their bikes for survival, I think about him and what he'd want us to do. He'd want us to help." Marcus looked around at these strangers who were treating him like family. Each face showed genuine concern and determination. These weren't just motorcycle enthusiasts. They were people who understood the sacred bond between a veteran and his bike, the healing power of the open road, and the importance of brotherhood in times of need. "There is one condition," Phoenix added with a smile. "You have to promise to ride with us sometimes. We meet every Saturday morning at Miller's Diner for coffee and a group ride. Janet's been bragging about your apple pie eating skills." The mention of Janet made Marcus laugh. Despite his emotional state, news traveled fast in the motorcycle community, and he should have known his story would spread beyond Derek. "You talked to Janet?" "She called Bull personally," Derek explained. "Said we better take good care of her favorite customer, or she'd ban us from her diner permanently. That woman doesn't make idle threats." Bull pulled out a leather vest with Iron Eagles patches and handed it to Marcus. "This is an honorary membership. You don't have to wear it if it conflicts with any other affiliations, but you should know you have a place with us whenever you need it." Marcus held the vest, running his fingers over the intricate embroidery. The patches told a story of community, service, veteran support, and brotherhood that transcended background, race, or economic status. "I'm honored. More honored than you can know," Derek walked over to the Harley and ran his hand along its familiar lines. I'm glad I could be part of giving this back to you. The bike belongs with you, Marcus. It's part of your story, not mine. As the Iron Eagles prepared to leave, each member shook Marcus's hand or gave him a brief hug. They left behind phone, numbers, addresses, and invitations to club events. Bull was the last to go, and he gripped Marcus's shoulder firmly. Veterans shouldn't have to choose between their therapy and their family's health. We can't fix the healthcare system or the government's treatment of veterans, but we can fix this one situation. Ride safe, brother. After they left, Marcus sat on his porch looking at his returned Harley and the envelope of money. His phone was already buzzing with a text from Sarah asking if he was free for dinner. He would give her the money tonight and tell her about the incredible generosity he'd witnessed. Emma would get her medicine and he would keep the freedom that had helped him heal. Word of the Iron Eagle's generous act spread through the community faster than Marcus could have imagined. By Friday morning, his phone was ringing constantly with calls from neighbors, local news stations, and people who had heard the story through social media posts and word of mouth. Marcus tried to maintain his privacy, but the story had taken on a life of its own. Janet from Miller's Diner called early that morning with excitement in her voice. Marcus, honey, you better get down here. There's something you need to see. When Marcus arrived at the diner, he found the parking lot filled with motorcycles of every make and model. Harley Davidson sat next to Honda Goldwings, vintage Triumphs next to modern sport bikes. The diversity was remarkable. Riders from different clubs, independent bikers, and people who rarely rode together were all gathered in one place. Inside the diner, Janet had hung a banner that read, "Welcome home, Marcus," and the entire place was buzzing with conversation about the Iron Eagle's act of kindness. Riders were sharing their own stories of veterans who had struggled, community members who had helped each other, and the unwritten code of brotherhood that existed among motorcycle enthusiasts. A woman named Maria approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. My husband served in Iraq and had to sell his bike when he got hurt and couldn't work. He's never been the same since. What those Iron Eagles did for you gives me hope that there are still good people in the world. An elderly man named Frank, wearing a Vietnam veteran cap, gripped Marcus's hand firmly. I heard about your situation through my grandson who saw it on Facebook. I want you to know that what you did for your granddaughter shows the kind of character our generation was raised with. But what those bikers did for you shows that the younger generation gets it too. Bull and several Iron Eagles members were already seated at a large table, having arrived early to avoid the crowd they knew would gather. Bull stood and gestured for Marcus to join them. Looks like your story touched more people than we expected, Bull said with a grin. Half the motorcycle community in 3 counties is here to meet you. Phoenix handed Marcus a coffee and pointed toward the window where more bikes were still arriving. We've gotten calls from motorcycle clubs as far away as Denver and St. Louis. Everyone wants to contribute to veteran support funds or start similar programs in their areas. Derek, who had become an unofficial liaison between the Iron Eagles and Marcus, looked overwhelmed by the response. Marcus, there are reporters outside who want to interview you about veterans' healthcare issues. The local VFW post wants to honor you at their next meeting. Even the mayor's office called asking if you'd accept a community service award. Marcus felt his anxiety rising. He'd never wanted attention or recognition for selling his bike. It had been a private family matter, a grandfather doing what grandfathers do. The growing crowd and media interest made him uncomfortable, reminding him of the crowds he'd learned to avoid after returning from Vietnam. Sensing his discomfort, Bull leaned closer. You don't owe anyone anything, Marcus. If you want to leave, we'll help you get out of here quietly. The story is bigger than you now, but that doesn't mean you have to be part of the circus. Before Marcus could respond, a small commotion at the diner's entrance caught everyone's attention. Sarah had arrived with Emma, who was wearing her school backpack and looked curious about all the motorcycles. The crowd parted respectfully as the little girl and her mother made their way to Marcus's table. Emma's eyes were wide as she took in the scene. Grandpa, are all these people here because of your motorcycle? They're here because they heard about what your grandfather did for you, Phoenix explained gently, kneeling down to Emma's level. A lot of these people think your grandpa is pretty special. Sarah looked overwhelmed by the attention. Dad, I had no idea this would happen. Emma's school called and said reporters were asking about her condition. I didn't know what to tell them. Marcus felt a protective instinct kick in. His granddaughter's medical situation was private, and he didn't want her becoming a poster child for healthcare reform or veteran issues. We should go home, he said quietly. This is getting too big. But Emma had noticed something else that captured her attention. On Phoenix's vest was a patch that read, "Guardian Angels Protecting Children." Emma pointed to it with curiosity. Are you really a guardian angel? Emma asked. Phoenix smiled warmly. Well, I try to be. A lot of us here try to watch out for people who need help, especially kids and veterans. Your grandpa is both a veteran and someone who takes care of a very special little girl. Bull had an idea. Emma, would you like to see some of the motorcycles outside? We could take you and your mom on a short ride around the block, let you experience what your grandpa loves so much about riding. Emma looked at her grandfather with excitement, but Marcus hesitated. The crowd outside had grown even larger, with cameras and reporters mixed among the genuine well-wishers. He didn't want his granddaughter exposed to media attention that could follow her for years. Janet appeared at their table with a plate of Emma's favorite chocolate chip pancakes. You know what? I think this little celebration has gotten a bit too big for its britches. Why don't you folks use my back exit? I'll tell everyone out front that the guest of honor needed to leave for a family commitment. An older rider named Steele, wearing patches indicating he was a Vietnam veteran, approached their table carefully. Marcus, I don't mean to intrude, but I wanted you to know that your story reminded me why I ride. After I got back from the war, my Sportster was the only thing that kept me sane. If I'd had to sell it for family reasons, I don't know what would have happened to me. Steele's words resonated with Marcus because they reflected his own experience. The Harley hadn't just been transportation or hobby. It had been medicine, therapy, and salvation rolled into chrome and steel. Losing it temporarily had created a void that went beyond missing a possession. That's exactly why we did what we did, Bull added. Motorcycles aren't just vehicles for veterans. They're lifelines. What you were willing to sacrifice shows incredible love for your family, but no veteran should have to choose between their mental health and their family's physical health. Emma, who had been quietly eating her pancakes while listening to the adult conversation, suddenly spoke up. Grandpa, do you want to show me how to ride your motorcycle? The innocent question brought laughter to the table and reminded everyone what really mattered. Not the media attention or the community response, but the relationship between a grandfather and his granddaughter, and the fact that both could now have what they needed. Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand. Dad, Emma starts her new medicine tonight. The doctor says we should see improvement within days. None of this would have been possible without your sacrifice and these people's kindness. As they prepared to leave through Janet's back exit, Marcus realized that while the attention was overwhelming, the story had highlighted something important about community, brotherhood, and taking care of each other. The Iron Eagles had started, something that was already rippling outward, inspiring others to help veterans in their own areas. The motorcycle community, it turned out, was much larger and more caring than he'd ever imagined. 2 weeks after the Iron Eagles returned his Harley, Marcus noticed remarkable changes in both his own life and Emma's health. The new medication was working better than anyone had dared to hope. Emma's energy had returned, her appetite improved, and most importantly, she was sleeping through the night without the joint pain that had plagued her for months. Sarah called every morning with updates about Emma's progress, and the relief in her voice was worth more than any motorcycle. Marcus had also started joining the Iron Eagles for their Saturday morning rides. The first time he showed up at Miller's Diner wearing the honorary vest they'd given him, he felt nervous about fitting in with the established group. But Bull and the others welcomed him like he'd been riding with them for years. The brotherhood wasn't just about motorcycles. It was about shared experiences, mutual respect, and looking out for each other. During one of these Saturday rides, Phoenix told Marcus about the ripple effect his story had created. We've gotten calls from motorcycle clubs in 12 states asking how to set up veteran assistance funds like ours. 3 groups have already helped veterans keep their bikes when medical bills threatened to force sales. The attention hadn't completely died down. Local television stations still occasionally mentioned the story, and social media posts about the Iron Eagle's generosity continued to circulate. But Marcus had learned to accept the recognition gracefully while maintaining his privacy. He gave one interview to the local newspaper, focusing on the importance of veteran support rather than his personal circumstances. What surprised Marcus most was how the experience had connected him with other veterans in his community. Men and women he'd lived near for years but never really talked to began stopping by his house, sharing their own stories of struggle and survival. Tom, his neighbor, introduced him to an informal group of local veterans who met monthly to discuss everything from VA benefits to job opportunities to family problems. One afternoon, while Marcus was working in his garden, a familiar sound caught his attention. The rumble of multiple motorcycle engines was approaching his street, but these didn't sound like the bikes he'd grown accustomed to hearing. These engines had a different note, deeper, more synchronized, like a mechanical symphony. Marcus looked up to see the most impressive sight of his life. Rolling down his quiet residential street was a procession of motorcycles that seemed to go on forever. Not just the Iron Eagles, though they were there, but representatives from dozens of motorcycle clubs, veteran organizations, and riding groups from across the region. The bikes ranged from pristine vintage Harleys to modern touring machines, sport bikes to custom choppers. Some riders wore leather vests covered in patches, others wore business suits, and still others wore military-style riding gear. As the procession approached his house, Marcus realized they weren't just passing by, they were stopping. Motorcycles began pulling into his driveway, onto his lawn, and lining both sides of his street for several blocks. Neighbors came out of their houses to witness the spectacle, children pointing excitedly at the different bikes, and even local police officers arrived to help direct traffic. Bull approached Marcus with a grin wider than any he'd worn before. "Sorry about the invasion, brother. We tried to keep this smaller, but word got out and everyone wanted to be part of it." "Part of what?" Marcus asked, though he was already overwhelmed by the sheer number of people gathering in his neighborhood. Phoenix appeared carrying a large check made out to Veterans Medical Support Fund in the amount of $127,000. The motorcycle community doesn't do anything small, Marcus. When your story went viral online, it inspired fundraising efforts across the country. This is just the beginning. Derek, who had been busy helping organize the massive gathering, explained further. Motorcycle dealerships started offering discounts to veterans who needed to sell bikes for medical reasons. Clubs began setting aside money for emergency funds. Even people who don't ride motorcycles started donating because your story showed them how veterans sometimes fall through the cracks of the healthcare system. A woman Marcus didn't recognize approached with a television news crew following behind her. She introduced herself as Amanda Martinez, a documentary filmmaker who specialized in stories about veteran issues. "Mr. Williams, I'd like your permission to tell your story as part of a larger documentary about veteran healthcare and community support. We want to show how individual acts of kindness can inspire nationwide change." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. What had started as a grandfather's quiet sacrifice for his granddaughter's health had somehow become a catalyst for nationwide discussions about veteran support, healthcare costs, and community responsibility. The money being raised would help hundreds of veterans keep their motorcycles while dealing with medical emergencies. Sarah and Emma arrived, having been alerted by neighbors about the gathering. Emma's eyes went wide at the sight of so many motorcycles, and she immediately began asking questions about different types of bikes. Her improved health was evident. She was running around excitedly instead of walking slowly and carefully as she had for months. "Grandpa, this is like a parade just for you," Emma exclaimed, tugging on his hand to show him a particularly colorful custom-painted Harley. A veteran named Carlos, who had driven from Texas specifically for this gathering, approached Marcus with tears in his eyes. "I had to sell my bike last year when my daughter needed surgery. I thought I'd never ride again. Because of what happened with you and the Iron Eagles, my local motorcycle club raised money to help me buy another bike. I'm here to thank you for showing people what brotherhood really means. Stories like Carlos's were repeated throughout the afternoon as Marcus met veterans from multiple states who had been helped by funds and programs inspired by his situation. Some had kept their motorcycles when facing medical crises. Others had been given bikes by fellow veterans, and still others had found jobs or healthcare assistance through the networks that had formed around motorcycle clubs. The mayor arrived, with a key to the city, and a proclamation declaring the day Veterans Brotherhood Day in honor of the Iron Eagles, and the community response to Marcus's story. Local businesses had donated food for an impromptu barbecue, and someone had brought a sound system for speeches and music. But the moment that meant the most to Marcus came when Emma climbed onto his Harley with his help and pretended to drive while making motorcycle engine sounds. The little girl who had been too sick to play just weeks before was now healthy enough to dream about her own future adventures. Sarah stood nearby taking pictures, tears of joy streaming down her face. As evening approached and the gathering began to wind down, Marcus found himself surrounded by new friends from the motorcycle community. Bull handed him a leather-bound book filled with contact information for veteran support resources, emergency funds, and motorcycle groups across the country. "This isn't ending here," Bull told him. "What started with your sacrifice and our response has created a permanent network of people committed to making sure veterans never have to choose between their therapy and their family's health." Marcus looked around at his quiet neighborhood, now marked by oil spots on the pavement and tire tracks on his lawn, but filled with more love and brotherhood than he'd ever experienced. The gathering had transformed from a simple thank you into something much larger, a celebration of community, healing, and hope. As the last motorcycles prepared to leave, Ghost, the older Iron Eagles member who had lost his brother in Desert Storm, approached Marcus one final time. "Your brother would be proud," he said simply, though Marcus knew he was talking about all veterans who had served and struggled. "We don't leave anyone behind, not on the battlefield and not at home." That evening, as Marcus sat on his porch, with his Harley parked safely in the driveway, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he had been a lonely veteran facing an impossible choice between his own healing and his granddaughter's health. Now he was part of a brotherhood that stretched across the entire country, connected to hundreds of people committed to supporting veterans and their families. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Grandpa, thank you for keeping your motorcycle. Maybe someday you can teach me to ride it. I love you." Below the message was a picture she had drawn of herself and Marcus on the Harley, both of them smiling under a bright yellow sun. Marcus smiled, knowing that the best part of the entire experience wasn't the attention, the money raised for other veterans, or even getting his bike back. The best part was that Emma was healthy, his family was secure, and he had learned that sometimes the greatest acts of sacrifice open the door to even greater acts of love from unexpected sources. 6 months after the Iron Eagles returned his Harley, Marcus Williams had become something he never expected to be, a symbol of hope for veterans across the country. The documentary about his story had aired nationally, and the Veteran Medical Support Fund established in his name had grown to over $500,000, helping more than 200 veterans keep their motorcycles while dealing with medical emergencies. Emma's health had continued to improve dramatically. The 8-year-old was now participating in school sports, had joined the Girl Scouts, and spent her weekends helping Marcus maintain his Harley. She had become fascinated with motorcycles and mechanics, often surprising him with technical questions she'd researched online. Sarah had been able to cut back to one job, spending more time with her daughter and even starting to date again, something Marcus encouraged, knowing Emma needed a father figure in her life. The Iron Eagles had officially made Marcus a full member rather than just an honorary one, and he participated in their monthly charity rides to raise money for various causes. The group had grown significantly, attracting new members who were drawn to their philosophy of veteran support and community service. Marcus had become something of a mentor to newer members, sharing his experiences and helping them process their own struggles with civilian life. On a crisp Saturday morning in October, Marcus was preparing for what had become the biggest event of the year, the annual Veterans Brotherhood Ride. What had started as a local gathering had grown into a multi-state event that attracted thousands of riders and raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for veteran support programs. This year's ride would culminate at the new Veterans Healing Center that had been built with funds partially raised through motorcycle community donations inspired by Marcus's story. As Marcus checked his Harley one final time before the ride, Emma appeared beside him wearing a miniature leather jacket that Phoenix had specially made for her. The jacket was covered in patches from various motorcycle clubs, all of them friends who had met Emma during visits to see Marcus. Grandpa, Bull, said I can ride in the support van with Janet and take pictures of all the motorcycles, Emma announced excitedly. He also said that when I turn 16 he'll teach me to ride if you say it's okay. Marcus laughed, knowing that Emma's fascination with motorcycles was genuine and deep. We'll see about that, sweetheart. You've got 8 years to convince your mother. Sarah arrived wearing her own leather jacket, having become an unexpected member of the motorcycle community herself. She had learned to ride 6 months ago, buying a used Honda Shadow that she rode to work and on weekend trips with Marcus and Emma. The single mother who had once worried about her daughter's future now radiated confidence and joy. Dad, the TV. Crews are already setting up at the starting point, Sarah reported. Derek called and said there are riders coming from as far away as California and Maine. They're estimating over 3,000 motorcycles will participate this year. The magnitude of the event still amazed Marcus. What had begun with his quiet decision to sell his bike for Emma's medicine had somehow inspired a movement that now affected veterans' lives across the entire country. Motorcycle dealerships offered special programs for veterans facing medical hardships. Clubs in every state had established emergency funds. Even the Department of Veterans Affairs had taken notice, implementing new programs to address gaps in mental health and medical coverage for veterans. At the ride's starting point, Marcus was overwhelmed by the sight of thousands of motorcycles arranged in neat rows, their chrome reflecting the morning sun like a metallic sea. Riders of all ages, backgrounds, and bike preferences had gathered for the same purpose, supporting veterans and celebrating the healing power of brotherhood and the open road. Bull approached Marcus with a special vest designed for the event. Instead of standard motorcycle club patches, this vest bore a simple message: Emma's grandpa, where it all started. Marcus was touched by the gesture, though he remained somewhat uncomfortable with the attention his story continued to generate. You know, brother, Bull said as they watched the massive gathering prepare for departure, what you did 6 months ago was just what any good grandfather would do. But what happened after? That's what makes this special. You let people help. You. And then you helped them help others. That's the cycle of brotherhood right there. The ride itself was spectacular, thousands of motorcycles moving in formation through the countryside, their engines creating a sound that could be heard for miles. People lined the roads to watch the procession pass, many of them veterans themselves or family members who understood the significance of the event. Marcus rode near the front with the Iron Eagles, Emma visible in the support van taking pictures and waving at spectators. At the dedication ceremony for the Veterans Healing Center, Marcus was asked to speak to the crowd. Standing before thousands of people, many of whom had traveled hundreds of miles to be there, he felt the same nervousness he'd experienced as a young soldier facing his first combat mission. But like then, he found strength in knowing his brothers had his back. 6 months ago, I thought I was just an old veteran doing what needed to be done for his granddaughter, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. I never imagined that selling my Harley would lead to something like this. But I've learned that individual acts of love and sacrifice can inspire incredible things when they're witnessed by people with generous hearts. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, veterans, family members, motorcycle enthusiasts, and community supporters who had all been touched by his story in some way. Emma is healthy now, not just because of the medicine we were able to buy, but because she's growing up in a world where she sees how people take care of each other. She's learning that when someone falls down, you help them up. When someone struggles, you carry part of their load. When someone sacrifices, you honor that sacrifice by paying it forward. Marcus concluded his speech by announcing that Emma had asked him to donate his speaking fee from various events to the Veterans Healing Center. She said that since her grandpa's motorcycle helped start all this, she wants her college fund contributions to help finish it. That little girl understands brotherhood better than most adults. As the day wound down and riders began their journeys home, Marcus found himself surrounded by Iron Eagles members and new friends from across the country. The Veteran Medical Support Fund had announced that day that it had reached its first $1 million milestone, ensuring that hundreds more veterans would never have to choose between their healing and their family's health. Derek, who had unknowingly started the chain of events by buying Marcus's Harley, approached with news. "Marcus, I've been accepted to nursing school. The Iron Eagles are helping with tuition through their education fund. I want to work in veteran health care, help bridge the gap between medical treatment and emotional healing." Phoenix added, "We've gotten word that 3 other states are implementing programs based on what we've done here. The motorcycle community is creating a permanent network of veteran support that will outlast all of us." As evening fell and the last motorcycles disappeared into the distance, Marcus sat on his Harley in the parking lot of the Veterans Healing Center with Emma on the seat behind him. Sarah was nearby, loading her own bike onto a trailer. She wasn't comfortable with night riding yet, but was determined to learn. "Grandpa," Emma said quietly, "are you happy you got your motorcycle back?" Marcus thought about the question seriously. The Harley was important to him, representing freedom, healing, and connection to his brotherhood. But the events of the past 6 months had shown him something even more valuable: the power of community, the strength that comes from letting others help, and the ripple effects of love and sacrifice. "I'm happy about a lot of things, sweetheart," Marcus replied. "I'm happy you're healthy. I'm happy your mom is smiling again. I'm happy I've met so many good people. And yes, I'm happy to have my bike back. But mostly I'm happy that sometimes when you do the right thing, even when it's hard, it inspires other people to do right things too." As they drove home through the quiet streets, Marcus reflected on how his life had changed. He was no longer just a lonely veteran dealing with his own struggles. He was part of something larger, a community dedicated to ensuring that no veteran had to face hardship alone, and no child had to watch their grandparents sacrifice their healing for medical bills. The Harley beneath him rumbled contentedly as they headed home, carrying not just a grandfather and his granddaughter, but the promise of hope for veterans everywhere who needed to know that their brothers and sisters were watching out for them, ready to flood their streets with support when life became too much to handle alone.